Hello everyone, it's Critbuff again, and I'm here with the Season of the Drifter. With it and with me come Update 2.2.0. While there's certainly a lot to talk about with the new Gambit Prime and Reckoning playlist, there were several other changes to the Sandbox. This patch addresses several quality of life concerns for weapons, exotics, subclasses, and more, so let's get to it. Starting things off with several changes to shotguns, which seemingly adds, a little bit of spice, a little bit of that variety into our lives with the special ammo weapon economy and the meta in PvE. Bungie reduced base damage for shotguns respective to their newly adjusted rates of fire, but then they nearly doubled their damage in PvE, so let's go ahead and talk about what all that means. Now, the exotic shotgun, Legend of Acurus, is going to stay the same. That's an exception to this rule, and that change isn't going to affect it. It's going to keep those pre-patch values that it had. Shotgun ammunition reserves were also reevaluated to work in the post-patch economy. The full auto-trigger system perks rate of fire bonuses were also changed. That's something else to note. So this perks bonus is down from its previous 100% multiplier to a 10% increase in firing speeds. Yikes, that hurts. The bonus side to all of this, though, the perk will no longer increase pellet spread for shotguns, so that's good. Tighter shots means you might get a little bit more reliable kills in the Crucible. Rapid fire frame shotguns were reduced from firing 200 rounds per minute to 140. Each of the other archetypes had their respective rates of fires adjusted accordingly. Aggressive frames are up from 45 to 55 RPM. Lastly, precision frames were 55 RPM and now they're 65. For exotics, the Chaperone is up to 70 RPM from its pre-update speed of 60, and the Legend of Acurus is now at 55, up from the pre-patch rate of 45, so that is a bump to Acurus there. The tractor cannon's description now properly states its real rate of fire as 80, previously it was saying 84 incorrectly, that was before the patch. Bungie was clearly unhappy with the dominance of rapid-fire shotguns in PvE. The threat level and the Ikelos, they were non-choices for the most effective PvE DPS builds in most fights, if you owned one. But this wasn't just because of their rates of fire. The Trench Barrel perk remains alone at the top for shotgun weapon perks, and it's going to stay there for the foreseeable future unless they can come up with something really neat for weapon perks. We'll see what they have up their sleeves. Bungie already took one pass at reining in Trench Barrel, but clearly felt that change alone just wasn't enough to reduce the effectiveness and the popularity of these two weapons. Hence, the reduction in the rapid-fire firing rate. Yeah, that makes sense. It will be interesting to see how the community adapts to these changes and to the new special ammo weapon economy. Rapid-fire shotguns were valuable tools for a wide margin of content in Destiny 2. They help to put down powerful enemies and challenging content, such as, the Knights in the Vault encounter or Cabal Gladiators rushing you down during the first few days following the release of the Volunder Forge. However, when I solo Nightfalls to see if I can break that 200,000 point threshold, I don't use shotguns. More often than not, I return to using two primaries or maybe a fusion rifle to reliably break shields at range, something like the Year 1 version of the Air Intel or something that has perks like that. Shotguns will likely continue to occupy the same space they did before, but you will theoretically, that's in air quotes there, have more variety in terms of choice for which shotgun you'll use. Moving on to other weapons, Bungie also slightly buffed base damage for submachine guns and then slightly nerfed their precision damage. This makes SMGs more forgiving in close quarters combat in both PvP and PvE, since you'll be much less dependent on landing headshots to get those kills. This could also mean stability will be less impactful as a stat for certain weapons than it was before. For machine guns, Bungie cut the ammo bonuses from the machine gun reserves in half and reduced the damage they do against bosses and mini-bosses by 21%. That is a yikes. These are both very severe nerfs for machine gun builds that will have impacts on several playlists. Trace rifles have seen their damage in PvE increased by 30%. This could make these weapons a very powerful choice for PvE. The Prometheus lens might become my ad-clearing weapon of choice for such activities as the Reckoning, Nightfalls, and then you've got Cold Heart and Wave Splitter, which could become top-tier weapons for bosses under the right circumstances, of course. There's always a little asterisk right there, isn't there? Heavy weapons saw a slew of changes across the board aimed at kind of changing up the meta in PvE with this update. Grenade launchers had their damage in PvE increased by 25%, with most launchers seeing a boost to the reserve ammo pools. This gain averaged out to about, on average, 3 extra rounds depending on the specific perks rolled with the launcher and other factors. Be aware that field prep will no longer affect your ammo reserves for these weapons. Bungie says they discovered an issue causing launchers in PvE to start with less ammo than they should, which they say they're going to fix in a future update, so we'll see how long it takes for that, trademark soon. You can also now modify your breech loader launchers with the quick access sling mod for even faster weapon swaps. You're in the Crucible, you fire off your militias or your mountaintop if you're better than I am at the Crucible, and then you just kind of switch weapons because you've got that one round fired, and now you're on to your next weapon to clean up the kill. I'm very interested to see if heavy grenade launchers will get more mileage in PvE, but I would have preferred new and more interesting perks instead of just flat damage buffs. I'll have to test these out in more challenging content to see if there are any unforeseen consequences to these changes. For now, they seem pretty straightforward. Allowing players to modify Mountaintop and militias with the quick access sling seems to be a solid and very welcome net gain for Crucible players using those weapons. Bungie buffed the damage rocket launchers do in PvE by 60 to 65%, but also reduced the damage that cluster bombs perk did by 80%, another kick in the sack. Whether this was done in response to players circumventing certain encounters and their mechanics with rocket launchers rolled with this perk, or if Bungie just felt cluster bombs were too strong in general, is unknown at the time. These changes are understandably upsetting to anyone who worked their butt off to farm or earn a well-rolled launcher with the cluster bomb perk. You have my sympathies. This trait has been a staple for more than a year for players, I think, right? Going back to the release of the Leviathan raid and the Sins of the Past legendary rocket launcher. Players may see launchers with a higher velocity rating and tracking module become more viable across more playlists, as these rockets will be hitting much harder than they did before the update. For exotic rocket launchers, the Two-Tailed Fox had its PvE damage improved by 26%, it's pretty sweet, not gonna hate on that. And the Wardcliff Coil saw a 115% buff in its damage in PvE against bosses, with a bump of 160% against weaker combatants. That's insane. I guess Wardcliff is the meta again, right? I'm genuinely happy to see the Fox get a buff, but the Wardcliff Coil might become mandatory for certain fights after this change. I mean, it's all going to depend on your composition and the content you're doing. Keep in mind, Bungie could very well walk that coil back at some point in the future, based on the data they gather. It's a wait and see thing. On a side note, I'm really happy I finished my masterwork. Hope you have. The Sandbox team also made some strides to help linear fusion rifles become more viable in PvE. Their damage in that PvE playlist was boosted by 10%, except for the exotic sleeper simulant. On the subject of the sleeper, its ammo reserves were reduced from a max of 13 to 9 without armor perks or the masterwork catalyst. So, again, with the sleeper nerfs. Aim assistance for this weapon type was also reduced by an undisclosed amount, with the aim assist bonus to the Queenbreaker's combat sight scope being removed outright. You cannot hear it, but I am screaming for joy on the inside. The bug causing the Queenbreaker to receive double the amount of aim assistance intended for that weapon was also fixed. The pool of legendary linear fusion rifles is extremely limited at the moment, so the impact of the buff to the PvE damage will live or die based on the viability of the perk pool for these weapons. It's interesting to see another hit to the sleeper's ammo reserves, which might make sense in the context of players constantly refilling their heavy ammo in the new Reckoning playlist using mods such as Taken Armaments. We'll see. I personally feel the nerf to Queenbreaker is approximately 90 days too late, but now is better than ever, I suppose. This weapon was the weapon of choice for invaders in Gambit. It'll be interesting to see the invasion meta shift to other long-range weapons as players realize they can't just point in the general direction of enemies and get free kills anymore. There were some other heavy exotic weapon changes, with Bungie buffing the Black Talon's PvE projectile damage by 15% and reducing the maximum amount of ammo reserves for the Whisper of the Worm from 20 to 9 without armor perks. Interesting. Lastly, for weapon changes, the Tyranny of Heaven legendary bow from the Last Wish raid can now drop with random rolls. For abilities, Bungie have reduced the Titan's maximum achievable speed through the use of macros on the PC platform. This was a major, and I cannot overemphasize this enough, major problem on PC when combined with the power of the One-Eyed Mask exotic helmet. This combo led to a clear imbalance between the classes in the competitive Crucible playlist on PC. Concerning the mask, Bungie have implemented their changes by reducing the duration of the marked debuff from 15 seconds to 8, and killing marked targets no longer instantly rewards health upon death, or rather, health upon killing the target. Instead, killing marked enemies will gradually restore health and then an overshield to the player. Lastly, this effect can no longer be triggered while the Titan is in their super, so cheer there as well. That was a little overkill, overpowered. These two changes will hopefully bring the Titans on PCs down to more, mere mortal levels in terms of what they can do in the Crucible and, you know, possibly more in line with everybody else down there. The Sandbox team have also implemented diminishing returns to the amount of super energy the Code of the Juggernaut's Trample perk rewards with kills from 100% to 30% over the course of 15 kills. It's regrettable, it's understandable. Do I like it? No. It's a nerf to the super's power in PvE, but I guess we could kind of see it coming. The infinite super was a little bit ridiculous. There are changes to several other exotic armor pieces in addition to the ones mentioned for the one-eyed mask. The Titan exotic helmet Kepri's Horn had its class energy gain from solar damage kills buffed from 10 to 15%, and now reduced the cooldown of that energy return from 2 seconds to 1, so a little bit of an internal cooldown there. You get a solar kill, you'd have to wait 2 seconds to get another kill and get that energy return for your barrier, or barricade, excuse me. Well, that's down to 1 second now, so that's good. The Solar Blast ground follow that the exotic generates upon activating your barricade had its damage increased from 80 to 100 in PvP, with the damage doubled in PvE. And the ground follow heads back to the player from the target. So you shoot, right, you put your barricade down, little burst of fire stuff goes out, hits the thing, now it's going to come back to you. It may not make all the way back, it usually didn't when I was playing with it. This can make Kepri's Horn a highly sought after exotic for bottom tree Solar Titans. Combining Rally Barricade's ability to constantly reload your equipped weapon with the damage bonus from the newly improved Sun Warrior perk, that can be very powerful together. We'll have to see how that plays out. Bungie buffed the damage of the Warlock's exotic armor piece, Vesper of Radius, from 70 to 100, with its damage tripled in PvE. I don't think this will be enough to make this exotic a viable choice when compared to basically any other Warlock exotic, but specifically Lunafaction boots. There are a lot of other amazing Warlock exotics out there, so, you know, best of luck, Vesper. It was nice knowing you. Perhaps it'll come in handy when you're doing more challenging activities with an Arc Singe. I don't know. We'll see. The Hunter exotic sealed Ahamkara's Grasp will now proc its exotic perk Nightmare Fuel from smoke bomb damage. This will be very helpful on weapons designed to work around perks like Rampage, as you'll be able to blind large groups of closely packed enemies and mow them down quickly thanks to the constantly refreshing magazines. That's going to be pretty sweet. The Titan exotic Ursa Furiosa was fixed to no longer count self-damage to Void Shield when calculating how much super energy to return. Not sure what counts as self-damage, but perhaps they're referring to something like the effects as the damage you take in Blind Well when you're standing outside the safety of the wells. This will require some further testing to fully understand. Lastly, the Titan exotic Antaeus wards had an issue fixed where the improved slide would not consistently apply, so that's fixed now. Well, Guardians, that's all for now. There were plenty of other changes to cosmetics and other aspects of Forsaken that I won't get into here, as this is already long enough. Be sure to head over to Bungie.net for a complete and comprehensive list of all the Update 2.2.0 changes. I almost messed that up. And of course, please be sure to keep an eye here on Planet Destiny for more Destiny 2 and Season of the Drifter news. Goodbye for now.